How's it going, everyone? COVID Breakout here, and today I have a very special video for you, an introduction into communications. I have a lot of different things laid out here on my table, and I've been receiving a lot of different questions from people that are interested in radios and asking various questions, so I figured I would share my knowledge back to the community and give you a little bit of things to think about. I will be reading from a script today. I do apologize because there's nothing worse than watching someone read as they're trying to convey information, but I want to make sure that the information I give to you today is accurate and as well as being meaningful. So you might see a few different hard cuts and things like that in the video, but I just want to make sure that this information is not only conveyed in a short format for you guys, since I know this is a really difficult topic with a lot of different components. This could easily be a 2-hour video, and I just want to make sure that this is as short and concise as possible. Right up front, if you already are knowledgeable about radios to any level, this might not be the video for you. This presentation is geared towards a newcomer who might be asking, what are the first steps in radios that I take? Which ones should I be purchasing? Which ones should I stay away from? How much do I need to spend? And what benefit in my preparedness plan will I receive by having a radio or a type of communications device? This is going to be a condensed video of a really vast topic. This can easily be a longer video. We could get into different kinds of models, such as digital radio communications with encryption, mesh-tastic, ATAC, satellite communications, and various others. But today, we're just going to cover some basic analog voice over a wide range of frequencies and what some of the options are. Something I see in the preparedness community is this. People aren't getting into radios because of how complicated this topic is overall. They might say it's too complicated, I don't know where to start, therefore I don't need it in my preparations. My goal in this video is to make this topic as approachable to the average person. In my experience, I have my general amateur radio license. I have been working with radios to some capacity, whether if that's as a hobby or in a volunteer application towards my community for the past 10 years. Along with that, I use radios in my personal preparedness plan with my family and trusted friends. Because radios are such a vast topic with a lot of different components to it, whether if it's coming from a preparedness perspective, a professional application, or simply a hobbyist perspective. You'll have many different schools of thought, and you have different approaches towards this topic. There are two primary audiences that I'm speaking towards today. One of them is going to be my fellow amateur radio operators on one side. Gentlemen, we have a responsibility to educate people, to share information, and to bring others into this hobby. One thing I see personally that is very problematic with the amateur radio community is its gatekeeping. Like other parts of our life, radios are regulated by a branch of the United States government, the FCC. I'm neither advocating nor discrediting this point. I'm just stating a fact. Just in the same way that the ATF is the agency that regulates firearms, suppressors, and things like that in this country. That said, there are some guidelines that they have in place, and I'll be talking about some of those today. And there are also people within the amateur radio space that feel it is their duty to also gatekeep and enforce the rules set forth by the FCC. I understand that might come across negatively, but you have to realize that the other audience that I'm speaking towards today is the prepared citizen. It's a common theme when a prepared citizen mindset channel on YouTube starts talking about radios. There's going to be an amateur radio individual, rightfully so, making comments about the legality and legal perspectives that the individual has not considered. It's going to be my focus in this video to try and bridge that gap as much as possible. There's a lot we can learn from both sides, whether if it's the amateur radio perspective or the prepared citizen perspective. One of the purposes of my channel here is to change the culture that is around us. Times are becoming more uncertain, civil unrest is on a rise on a daily rate, and communications are a very vital part of community as a whole. I encourage all of you in the comments below to have a civil conversation. Let's talk about this not only logically, but out of respect for others. Let's make this a video resource where newcomers from the preparedness and firearms community can get excited. So maybe they want to go take their ham radio test and get educated by people that have been doing this in a hobby perspective for over decades. Let's make communications a serious part of our preparedness plan, and together we can learn something from anyone. All of that said, Why radios? What is the reason behind radios? I feel that radios are a general form of communication that a lot of people might not think about. I don't think anyone would argue that a cell phone with its ability to call or text a loved one is irrelevant in today's society. Just as I'm sharing this information to you over a screen, radios are a form of sharing information, connecting with loved ones, and fellowship. The biggest advantage with radios is you provide the infrastructure. You're not relying on a cell phone tower, going through a network, going through a local node. You are using the airwaves to make your communications from point A to point B. Let's take one piece of recent history that amateur radio in general excelled in a particular need for communications that conventional infrastructure such as cell phones, first responders, comms, and other forms of connectivity to the internet simply failed. And of course, we're talking about North Carolina with Hurricane Helene. Specifically, you can look up accounts of the Mount Mitchell repeater and how radios were used by licensed and unlicensed individuals in that time of natural disaster to coordinate relief efforts, first responders, and connecting people with their loved ones. I understand not everyone in this video might be looking at a natural disaster when talking about radios and filtering that through their preparedness plan, but there are other applications that I can explain that would turn this into a longer video, quite frankly. Gentlemen, you are all adults here. You can look at radios and things I have on this table and figure that out for yourself if that's something that you would like to assess in your personal preparedness plan. Personally, I like to use radios, whether if I'm out hiking or doing recreational outdoor activities, primarily because in a lot of those areas, there's low cell phone service. So it's an easy way for me to hand off a radio to a loved one or a friend and be able to stay connected with them. There are three categories within radios that I would like to talk about today. And we're going to be talking about the different frequencies. They all do something different. The three categories are UHF, VHF, and HF. UHF frequencies primarily consist of the GMRS, FRS, and amateur radio frequencies. I don't have an FRS or a GMRS radio in front of me today. If you go into any big box store or hunting store and find a 2-pack of radios, more than likely those are going to be in the FRS frequency spectrum. Why the FRS frequency spectrum is appealing is they are a license-free frequency allocation that the FCC grants to anyone as long as you have those approved radios. You can use them the moment that you rip them out of that pack, and you can hand them off to family members, people in your hunting community, and just pass them along and talk pretty much all day long. They have limited capabilities as far as their channels. They have fixed antennas, and their range is also limited because of that factor. But because of the price point and the license-free perspective, they are generally used and accepted by a lot of people in the outdoor recreational activities space. GMRS is a similar set of frequencies that allow you to have a larger range of frequencies, so more channels to work with, more powerful radios, and detachable antennas, meaning that the antenna itself is able to be removed and you can put a better antenna, a smaller one if you need to have something a little bit more low profile, or a larger base station antenna. Another attractive thing about the GMRS frequencies is there is an application for the FCC license that grants you access to those frequencies. A minimal fee is involved and the license extends to you and your family. In the VHF spectrum, the MURS frequencies are similar to the previously stated FRS frequencies, being that they are license-free and they come in a specific set of radios that are allocated in these channels. VHF in general is better at traveling distances through forests, places with leaves and vegetation that sometimes UHF frequencies will have a hard time penetrating through that. Marine and maritime radios are also falling into this VHF category. CB or citizens band radios fall into the HF spectrum. While they are not as popular as what they once were back in the 1970s and 80s, they are still a license-free option to consider. They are directly affected by the sun's solar cycle, primarily by sunspot activity, which can enhance long-distance communication by improving atmospheric conditions. During periods of high sunspot activity, operators may experience a better signal propagation, but also increased noise and congestion on the airwaves. CB in recent years has declined in popularity due to the popularity of GMRS and other smaller handheld radios, and as well as their smaller antennas. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's amateur radio. Amateur radio has large portions of frequencies in all three of these categories, UHF, VHF, and HF, whereas the previous categories only have a few channels to their own. There are repeaters that can be used all over this country in the UHF and VHF spectrum. Let me talk about repeaters real quick. Say if there is a mountain, a hypothetical mountain right here in front of me, and I'm talking on one side of the mountain, picture me with my little radio in a valley right there, and there's this mountain here, and my buddy that I'm trying to talk to is over here. Because of the small antennas here and how UHF and VHF frequencies are relatively line of sight, I'm probably not going to be able to hear the information my friend is saying over the radio because of this mountain that's in front of us. A repeater is a tower or other type of infrastructure that allows my signal to travel up to the tower and get rebroadcasted over this whole area in front of me. So that's an effective way for my friend to be able to listen to what I'm saying. My signal's going up to the repeater, it's broadcasting this over a large area, thus my friend is able to hear my information. And if he's set to the right frequencies, he will then be able to pass his information over to me as well. The amateur radio community has clubs or small groups of people that host and maintain these repeaters on mountaintops. There's probably, I'm gonna guess 15 or 20 within a 80-mile radius of where I live that I could easily talk to people in one specific county or another one, or sometimes I'm even able to spread across multiple different counties. And sometimes I can even do that with just a simple handheld radio and be able to cover a signal that can effectively be a radius of 30 to 40 miles. Obviously, because of my license as an amateur radio operator, I am able to utilize those repeaters to whatever situation that I may find myself in. Now let's talk about HF. HF allows you to take full advantage of the ionosphere and how radio waves are reflected back to the ground. If I were to put this in layman's terms, when you get into the HF spectrum that these larger base station radios can tap into, and if I have the correct antenna, this is a very long wire antenna. It's on a spool and essentially has a transformer that then I could run this through a tree or trying to get this about 30 feet up in the air. And of course, there's various configurations. I can put that in. We're not going to talk about those today. But basically, I plug those two things in and I'm able to get a whole wide range of the HF frequencies. I can cover a whole state with my signal, a whole tri-state area, and in some conditions under certain bands, since they all reflect off of the ionosphere differently, I can even send my signal across the country. I can even reach other continents. All that's required for me to tap into these frequencies through the entire amateur radio spectrum are the tests that the FCC has to give you your amateur radio license, as well as your FCC call sign. I understand that's a lot of information. You might not have been looking for that. You might be looking for a simple, hey, what is the first radio I should buy? I'd like to encourage you to dig deeper and to really think about what it is you're trying to do with your preparedness plan. Are you simply trying to reach your neighbor who lives half a mile away from you? That mission is going to look differently than if you want to have a tri-state communications plan with trusted friends who live several hundred miles away. The very first thing I would encourage you to do is pick up a very inexpensive Baofeng UV5R with a quality antenna. There's many different options out there. These are from Signal Stick. There's other types of foldable antennas, but the basic antenna, I don't even have one here with me because I think I've thrown them all away. The basic antenna that comes with these UV5Rs is not good. Having a different antenna that's going to be able to give you better gain, better signal reception due to it being closer to the wavelength that you're talking on is going to perform much better than the stock small antenna that comes with the UV5Rs. Because of how popular these UV5Rs are, there is a large amount of different types of cable routing and things like that that you could be able to put in a push to talk with a microphone setup for certain applications if you want to have hearing protection and still be able to be out on a range and doing some shooting and be able to talk with people in your local area. There's lots of different options that you can do there. Because of the price point of the UV5R being $20 to $30 depending on which model you purchase, it gives you a lot of bang for your buck. You're not going to be sad if this one completely falls apart, or if it gets flooded, or if it gets dropped and broken. These are really simple radios. There's lots of different parts for them. You can get larger batteries. You can get different types of headsets for them, whether if you want to have a low profile push to talk or something larger like what I have here. There's various antenna options to go with, but this gives you a starting block for very cheap for you to be able to understand some of these basic principles. You don't need to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on a radio just for a basic communications plan. Here I have a Yaesu VX6R. I really love this radio. It is fully submersible, IP67 rated. The battery life on this is incredible, and it gives me all of everything I need for the amateur radio frequencies in a very small and rugged form factor. These radios are $200 to $250 depending on the price that you get. And they do the exact same set of frequencies that the $30 UV5R is able to do. It's just this one does it better, but because of my education, how I train, the applications I find myself into, I opted for this one for certain applications. It's hard to beat the UV5R and what it can do. When you get into larger radios, such as these two, both by Yaesu, this is a 6-watt QRP radio. It is the Yaesu 818, and this is able to do all three, the UHF, the VHF, and the HF spectrum. The furthest contact that I've made with this, I have to go back and check my logbooks, but I'm 90% certain that I've reached an individual in Texas on the 20-meter band. And for 6 watts with my portable antenna setup, running AA batteries, that's the other thing. This one takes 8 AA batteries on the bottom there. That's quite an incredible utilization of power for the frequencies that I'm using. And for that contact, it was a great communication. I was able to get through and he was able to hear me. Having a larger base unit though, that's able to push 100 watts in the HF spectrum is definitely going to be very beneficial, especially if you want to have consistent regional communications. One of the other things about the HF frequency spectrum is you are able, in certain antenna configurations, remember how we talked about that the ionosphere reflects the signals coming off of these frequencies? In certain antenna configurations, you can project all of your signal straight up to the ionosphere and bounce back down to give you a 0 to 300 mile radius in certain frequencies and certain conditions. The technical term for that type of communication in HF is NVIS, and there are many different videos on YouTube talking about that. I can also power both of these radios off of this 12-volt battery, and I can charge that through my wall at home with a power cable, and then I can take that into the field, and I can also put that to a solar charger and be able to communicate effectively for many hours with either one of these radios. Let me say one more point about the UV5R. A lot of people underestimate the power that you can do with just 5 watts in a little handheld like this. With the correct antenna setup, I'm going to showcase a video right here. My good friend Tim from Well Done Homestead, he used a different variant of a 5-watt radio. I think it was the UV Pro, and I used my VX6R. And with a homemade measuring tape Yagi antenna, I was able to effectively communicate from my backyard to his. Our line of sight there is about 14 miles, and I was able to have effective communications with him. We were using amateur radio frequencies at that point because of us both being licensed amateur radio operators. But that just gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the things you can do with just a simple UV5R. We've done that same thing with a UV5R. For the $30 it took for us to both buy a UV5R and the $20 and change for us to make those measuring tape Yagi antennas for $50 roughly. I mean, we're not talking a whole lot of money. We are able to have effective communications utilizing the airwaves to establish communication over a very long distance. If we were just using regular FRS radios, more than likely it wouldn't work. Not with the small antennas that they come with. But that gives you a very important data point of how crucial it is to utilize not only a radio and its power wattage, but a good antenna to get your signal to where it needs to go. Well, gentlemen, I could talk for hours. This is just a very basic introduction video. I have many more ideas coming through the pipeline here to bring to the channel. I want to hear from you guys. What are some things that you want to learn about radios? What are you seeing other people's talking about? What are you not seeing people talk about? And once again, I want this to be a positive, encouraging video for all people to be able to come together and be able to look at this logically without shaming or gatekeeping people. Because at the end of each day, it is up to us to make sure that we are prepared for ourselves, for our families, and for our community. These are tools, just in the same way that firearms or rucks or plate carriers or other things like that in the preparedness community are tools. These are equally as important. It's up to us to make sure that we present information appropriately so that others can learn about it, and that in turn will make the entire community a better place and more capable. Gentlemen, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something in today's video, and I will see you next time.